The church at Philadelphia is the next church that we're going to study about in Revelation chapter 3. We have looked at 5 churches so far, and we have 2 more to go. Church at Philadelphia and the church at Laodicea here in Revelation chapter 3. Revelation chapter 3 verses 7 through 13 is the letter to this particular church. Again, one of the 7 churches of Asia. As I was reading this and digging into it and studying it, I really enjoyed and liked what I read. This is one of those congregations. I say one of those congregations. There is one other, so 2 congregations in which the Lord did not have anything bad to say about. I particularly like how Jesus described himself in this letter. And of course we will get to that hopefully tonight. If not, we will resume next Sunday evening. So as we look at this particular letter here in Revelation 3 verses 7 through 13, again we're going to follow the same outline format which we have looked at with all of these congregations. First of all, we have the city, and we have the church, and number 3, the Christ. All 3 of these points here are found in verse 7. The city, the church, and the Christ. So let me be turning there in my Bibles myself. In my Bible here in Revelation chapter 3, beginning with verse 7. So let's just read this letter to get sort of a feel for it and a brief overview of the things that the Lord said. And then we'll go back to verse 7. To the angel, or we would say again to the messenger of the church in Philadelphia, write. These things says he who is holy, he who is true, he who has the key of David, he who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. I know your works. See, I have set before you an open door, and no one can shut it. For you have a little strength, have kept my word, and have not denied my name. Indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan, who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you, because you have kept my command to persevere. I also will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. Behold, I come quickly. Hold fast what you have, that no one may take your crown. He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go out no more. And I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God. And I will write on him my new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. As has been the case with all of these letters, there are some challenging aspects of them, including this one here to the church at Philadelphia. And we will get to these in time as we look at these individual verses and these individual points. All right, so let's go back to verse 7. Again, we want to look at these 3 points that are given or seen there in verse 7. The city, number 1, the church, number 2, and the Christ, number 3. Again, to the angel or the messenger of the church in Philadelphia. Keep in mind that every church, every congregation had an angel or had a messenger. I'm not going to go back over all that again, but that would have to be, when we study everything that is said about this angel or this messenger, there is no doubt it is some type of earthly messenger, either the evangelist working with those congregations for each one, or the eldership as a whole itself. I don't know, doesn't really matter. But this messenger to the church in Philadelphia was to write these things. And we learn from other verses that they were to read the contents of the letter itself, and not just the specific letter written to that congregation, but all of the letters that were written to all of the 7 churches of Asia. All right, so what about this city of Philadelphia? The city, if you look on a map, was about 28 miles southeast of Sardis, which was the previous church we studied about. There were so many temples erected in the city of Philadelphia so that it was nicknamed the Little Athens. Why was it called the Little Athens? Well, because the literal city of Athens was, we might say, the actual headquarters for temples practically on every street corner. And all of the so-called deities or gods that were worshipped there in the city of Athens. And so because the church in Philadelphia had so many of these temples, it was referred to as the Little Athens. Now, where did the city actually get its name from? We're going to spend just a little bit of time looking at the name of the city. And of course, it is Philadelphia. We have a city, a major city by that name, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. There may be some other smaller cities or towns that are called Philadelphia. Does anybody know that? Is there any other city that you know of that's referred to as Philadelphia? I can't think of any right off. But we do know of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The city was named Philadelphia after its founder, King Attalus II. King Attalus II. And King Attalus II was referred to as Philadelphus. Philadelphus. Why was he referred to by that name? Well, you have to look at the Greek language, the common language of the people, which would have been Koine Greek. By the way, that language does not exist anymore. It went out of existence in the 4th century, I believe. Now, we still have Greek language today. It's just not that type of Greek language. It's a different type. So why was he called Philadelphus? Well, because that word Philadelphia is from the Greek root word phileo. And it has to do with this right here. Brotherly love. And it properly denotes more of a tender affection or a fondness that one exhibits in his life and how he may treat someone. So the word phileo is distinguished from the Greek word agape or agapeo. You've heard that word before, agape love. Now, we use the word love in a very elastic sense today, a very broad sense. And I think I've given the example before. You may say, I love this cake, or I love this cheesecake, or I love my spouse. Now, you might love the cheesecake the same way you love your, well, hopefully not. But it wouldn't be agape, that's right. But you can see how the word love is used. It's very broad. And the Greek language was very precise. All right, you had different words. Agape, which was the highest form of love. If you wanted to talk about a brotherly love or a tender affection that you have, you feel good about someone, you wouldn't use agape. You would use phileo. And, vice versa. If you're talking about love that is the highest form of love that you can know, it doesn't, depending upon how you feel, it's always manifested in doing what's right for a person's good. It is the type of love that we are to have for the Lord, agape. So that's not phileo. It's a different type of love. So you understand the difference between the two. There are other Greek words for love. We'll not get into all that, but agape and phileo are the two most common words that we find in the New Testament. But he was referred to, this founder, King Attalus II, was referred to as Philadelphus because he was said to be a great admirer of his brother, whose name was Ecumenus II, and he was king of Lydia. He had a great fondness for his brother, Ecumenus II. And so, out of affection, out of a love that he had for his brother, well, the king named the city Philadelphia, which means, again, brother loving, or the city of brotherly love. Now, we'll come back to this point here in just a moment as we look at this word Philadelphia a little bit more, or phileo. We're going to look at some scriptures on this. But let's look at some further things about the city of Philadelphia itself. Where this city was located and situated on a map, and how it corresponded to boundaries of other countries, it was said to be the gateway to the east. The gateway to the east. Now, we are perhaps familiar with that terminology because St. Louis is referred to as the gateway to what? To the west. That's because, the westward migration mainly went through this area of St. Louis. By the way, St. Louis was at one time the fourth largest city in all of America in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so it's known as the gateway to the west. So here we have Philadelphia, gateway to the east, because it was situated on one of the greatest highways in the world, which led from Europe going east into the continent of Asia. And so it was a border city where three countries met. You had Lydia, Mysia, and Phrygia. And sometime maybe you want to look that up on a map, you can see that. Now, because of this, it viewed itself as an open door. An open door from one culture and one country to the next. Going into a completely different culture and country. It's interesting that Jesus used this language in verse 8, did he not? He says, I have set before you an open door. And we'll talk more about the significance of that later on. So, this was something about the city of Philadelphia. One other thing about this city, and then we'll move on to the church itself, is that it was said to be very influential in the spreading of the Greek language and the Greek culture in the eastern regions and beyond. So there are a few facts. There are many other things we could study about Philadelphia, but these are some of the things that I was able to glean in my study and research of this city of Philadelphia. Again, we're going to come back to this word Philadelphia here in just a moment. But any comments or questions on the city of Philadelphia? All right. If not, we'll look at number 2, the church. The angel of the church in Philadelphia. Revelation, that is the book of Revelation, is the only place that we read about this congregation in the New Testament. The book of Revelation, that seemed to have been characteristic, that is characteristic of all these churches, really, except for the church at Ephesus, which we read a whole lot about in the New Testament. And also the church of Laodicea. There is another reference made to the church at Laodicea in the book of Colossians, but we'll look at that then. So this is the only place in the book of Revelation. Now, when you, again, I mentioned this just a moment ago, but when you read this letter to this congregation, the Lord did not condemn them for anything. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not always room for improvement. But as far as something that was actually wrong, Jesus didn't mention it. And if there was, he certainly would have mentioned that, as he did with these other congregations. There's no mention of idolatry. There's no mention of immorality in this church. Now, true or false? Idolatry and immorality had plagued some of the other congregations. Very true, very true. You wonder, how in the world did they escape that, the prevalence of such idolatry in the little Athens? Well, they did. I mean, if they were guilty of idolatry or immorality, Jesus would have called it out. That shows you, brethren, that a church congregation can exist in an environment where these things are and still be faithful. Still be faithful. And not allow the culture that surrounds them to so influence them to that degree. It may be challenging, but it is possible. And we see that here from the church at Philadelphia. It does seem, however, that there was a major threat to this congregation. Certainly idolatry and immorality are always threats to a congregation, no matter what day and time we find ourselves in. Even now, we have our own idols today, don't we? People stay away from services because of idolatry. They put the things of the world ahead of God. And, money is an idol. Of course, money's always been an idol. Sports today, how big is sports in our culture? Very much so. Now, I love sports. I'm not a sports fanatic. I like to watch racing and college football. That's about it. I used to watch a lot of pro football until they got a little woke back here several years ago. And, I won't get into all that. Get on my soapbox on that. But, these things are idols today. Entertainment crazy today. James is holding up his cell phone. Yeah, I got one too, brother. And everybody does these days. And we have to be very careful. It's an amazing tool, technology. We have this back here recording. I hope it's recording. Sometimes it gives us, I work in a world of technology. And it's always evolving. You have this new artificial intelligence. And I've really been working. You work any with ChatGPT and some of that stuff. Isn't that amazing what that can do? It just blows your mind into a million pieces. It is incredible. You can ask it anything. It doesn't always get it right, but it's amazing what it can do. Well, so, anything is technology. If you use it for good, it can be great. Now, many people, a long time ago when television was invented, what did people say about that? Going to destroy our whole culture. Now, I tell you, in a lot of ways it has wreaked havoc on our culture because it was used in an evil way. But it still can produce good. The internet can be good if you know how to use it. Now, many people just use it for evil and bad. Technology is not bad in and of itself. It's not evil in and of itself. It depends on how a person uses it. And that's how it has always been, and I guess will always be. All right. But where I was going with this, based upon what Jesus said here in this letter to this congregation, it seems that the major threat to this congregation was from Jewish opposition. And we see that there in verse 9. He says, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but they lie. Indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. We'll talk more about that later on. But, the church today, as I have studied every one of these congregations, everything that is said in these letters are applicable to the church in any day and time. Here we are 2,000 years removed, approximately, from this time period. How in the world are these things relevant to us today? Now, if you can't see by now how these things are relevant, well, you haven't been listening. But you can take the principles of truth that are contained in these 7 letters and apply them, I believe, to any situation, any problem that arises within the church. We have talked extensively about the work of the church. We have talked about, false teachers and false doctrines. We've talked about immorality. And we've talked about faithfulness. We've talked about what it means to overcome, and so on and so forth. You can take these principles of truth and apply them to everything the church faces today. And that is what is amazing about these 7 letters. If you study it intently and carefully, you will see that to be the case. And I hope you have been able to see these things as we have journeyed along in these letters. All right. One interesting thing, and this kind of goes back to the city itself. It was situated in an area that was very prone to earthquakes. So much so that the people who were constantly having to go out of the city to seek refuge. It's interesting, in light of that, what Jesus said there in verse 12. He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall what? Go out no more. And then he talks about the city of God, the new Jerusalem, that is heaven itself. When we all get to heaven, as the song says, when we all get to heaven, we will never have to worry about leaving that place or something happening. There will be no earthquakes in heaven that we'll have to escape from. There will be no natural disasters or calamities so that we have to go out of the doors of heaven. And so perhaps this was language that they could relate to, having experienced that very thing in a physical way. All right. Let's look at this word Philadelphia some more. Greek word is indeed Philadelphia. Philadelphia, that is the Greek word. Again, the root word is phileo. In case you're taking notes, let me just put this here. Phileo, phileo. And Philadelphia from this root word phileo. All right, let's look at some other scriptures on this. First of all, let's keep your place there at Revelation 3, and let's turn back to the book of Romans, chapter 12, verse 10. Romans chapter 12, verse 10. I did not check other translations on this, so I'm not exactly sure how the old King James reads or any other translation. But the New King James says in Romans 12, verse 10, "Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love." Does anybody have something different on that? Or is that what it says in the old King James? Okay, so it does have that expression, brotherly love. Well, that is from Philadelphia. That entire expression, brotherly love. So you have two English words that come from that one word, Philadelphia, or phileo. Again, the root word phileo. But Philadelphia here is translated as brotherly love. That's what we're talking about. Not agape, but brotherly love. Now, certainly we are to agape one another. Other verses teach that. I am to agape you and you to me. But here, this particular verse says we are to have this brotherly love for one another. So that's one verse. Let's take a look at another. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 9. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 9. Here it is again. "But concerning brotherly love, you have no need that I should write to you, for you yourselves are taught by God to love one another." All right, and so there again, I just want to point out, we see that expression, brotherly love. Two English words from the one Greek word, Philadelphia. And then the next verse is Hebrews chapter 13, verse 1. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 1. We have this very simple statement made: "Let brotherly love continue." Again, the phrase brotherly love from Philadelphia. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 22. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 22. All right, here we have 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 22. He says, "Since you have purified your souls in obeying the truth through the Spirit, in sincere," now notice this expression, "love of the brethren, love one another fervently with a pure heart." That expression, love of the brethren, is from Philadelphia. You have 1, 2, 3, you have 4 English words there that translates that one word, Philadelphia. Does the King James read any differently on that? Yes, sir. Okay, very good. Thank you. Yes, it does say the same. Love of the brethren. That is phileo, or Philadelphia, a brotherly love. Again, that fondness and that tender affection that we are to have one for another. All right, so those are some of the passages. We could look at a few others in which we find the word Philadelphia. But here are a few that speak of the brotherly love. So, what are we to have to one another? Not only just agape, but also phileo one another. All right, any comments or questions on that? Okay, if you will be turning back to Revelation chapter 3. We're not going to have time to get into everything here in verse 7 on this third point concerning the Christ and how he describes himself. You will recall, though, in every one of these letters, every single one that we have looked at, Jesus describes himself in various metaphorical, symbolic language. And we pointed out a long time ago that how Jesus describes himself in these various letters, they all point to his rule, his sovereignty, his authority, his power, his faithfulness. And we see one other thing here in verse 7, and that is his purity, his absolute purity. These things says he, and what is the first one given there? All right, very good. Holy. He who is holy. You know, we like to sometimes talk about the themes of the Bible, one of the great themes of the Bible. From Genesis to Revelation, there are just certain subjects that are emphasized over and over, beginning with Genesis, going through Revelation. I would dare say that holiness, being holy, is one of those major themes of the Bible. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, obviously, because this could be a whole series of lessons, in and of themselves. But we do need to understand something very important when it comes to the holiness of the Lord in contrast to our holiness. Now, we are called to be holy people. Now, that word holy in the Scriptures, it is from a word that more literally means to be separate. To be separate. Now, oftentimes when we think of the word holy, we think of having good moral behavior. I'm a holy person. I don't steal. I don't commit adultery. And, things of that nature. I'm a holy person. And don't get me wrong, that is certainly true when it comes to holiness. Living a moral, separate life from the world. You have separated yourself from the lifestyle of the world. Well, there is something else about holiness to understand that the Bible teaches with equal force of what it means to be separate. Not only does holiness or separation include the moral and ethical side, but it also includes the religious or theological side in what we do. Somebody says, Brother Ben, what do you mean by that? It means simply this: how we approach God in our worship to Him. All right? How are we coming together? How are we worshiping God? Are we worshiping in holiness? That is, in separation from the feigned and spurious and false worship that we see in the world? Now, it's not enough just to be a good moral person. As important as that is, we must be holy, separate in that. But what a lot of people miss is that the way you worship God must also be separate. Now, how many have the idea, well, it doesn't make any difference how you worship God, as long as you are sincere in the things that you're doing, God will accept it. How many people believe that? Most religious people. Now, they may live a moral life just like we are, so they are holy in that sense, which is great. We appreciate people like that. I mean, there's nothing worse than being neighbors with people who are not holy in their conduct, right? I mean, it is manifested in their lives every day. But what about our worship? Has God ever just accepted any old kind of worship that we want to give Him? Never has He allowed that or accepted that. Rather, He has always given a prescribed way to worship that is separate. So remember that about the word holy. Separation. We have separated ourselves from the world. Now, how does this relate to the Lord being holy? We are holy. The Lord is holy. But we're not holy in the same sense as the Lord. Nor can we be. The Lord being holy means that He is absolutely holy. Absolutely holy. In its absolute sense. Now, will we at times fail in our holiness? Absolutely we do. We fail in that. Does the Lord ever fail? No. That's right. He is the epitome, we might say, of holiness, of separation. Therefore, He is that perfect example that we're always looking to. So He is absolutely holy. In Hebrews chapter 7, just a couple of minutes left, but let me try to get a couple things in here about this. Hebrews chapter 7, verse 26 says this about Jesus, that He is a high priest who is fitting for us. That is, He relates to us as our high priest. But listen to how He is described here in Hebrews 7, verse 26. He is holy. There's that word holy. But it goes on to say, He is harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, and has become higher than the heavens. So notice those words that describe Jesus. Holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners. Now, as we think about the holiness of the Lord, I looked let me say this. In the original language, let me put this here on the screen so you can see it. In the original language, and I don't know why this is not brought out in our English translations, you have the definite article, the, that precedes the word holy. Now, I did look in the English Standard Version, the ESV, and it actually has this right here. The Holy One of God. If you're interested in what translation that is, that's the ESV. English Standard Version, ESV. It says the Holy One of God. Now, there are other scriptures that where we also see this title that is given to Jesus. And let me just mention these here. Mark chapter 1 and verse 24. Now, what is really fascinating about that verse, Mark 1 and verse 24, is that we see a demon speaking to Jesus. And this demon said this about Jesus: I know who you are, the Holy One of God. Even that demon knew who Jesus was. Does Satan know who Jesus is? Oh, you better believe he does. And he does not want us to know who he is. You understand that? He doesn't want us to know that. But it's really intriguing that this demon said to Jesus, I know who you are, the Holy One of God. In Acts chapter 3 and verse 14, Acts 3 and verse 14, we find Peter. He is preaching the gospel to a Jewish audience. And some of the very ones who were present were there at the trial of Jesus saying, crucify him, crucify him. And they put him on a cross. They crucified him. And Peter says there in Acts 3 and verse 14, he says to those Jews, you have denied the Holy One and just, and asked for a murderer to be granted to you. What's Peter talking about? He's talking about the trial of Jesus. When you were there, you denied Jesus. He was the Holy One. He was the just one. And you wanted to release a murderer. And that's exactly what happened. Right? So there, I just want to point out the fact, there he is referred to as the Holy One. Now, before we leave this point, and we'll end with this, look at Revelation chapter 4, verse 8. Revelation chapter 4 and verse 8. I mentioned just a moment ago how the Lord is holy in its absolute sense. He's absolutely holy. He's the epitome of holiness. Now, here in Revelation 4 and verse 8, it says that the four living creatures, each having 6 wings, were full of eyes around and within, and they do not rest day or night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. Now, this is what these 4 living creatures were saying as they were there around the throne of God. Notice the triple emphasis upon the word holy. Everybody see that? Holy, holy, holy. What does that triple emphasis mean? It points to the fact, this is what we're saying. God is, I don't know of any other word to use except to say He is absolutely holy. The personification of holiness, the essence of holiness. Holiness, we might put it like this when it comes to the Lord, it's not something that is abstract from the Lord like it is with us. We have to learn holiness. We have to be taught it, and we can relinquish it. That's not the case with deity, with God. You see, God, the Lord, and Jesus is God, by the way. We need to remember that. Jesus is God. He is deity, all right? He possesses all the attributes of deity, of eternality. And so He's one with the Father. And so, holiness is not something that's abstract with God. They didn't have to learn holiness, did they? They didn't have to be taught it like we do. They are holy. And so we need to remember that about the Lord. And you think about when you come into His presence, a most holy, absolute holy God. Are we going to try and approach Him in prayer when we are living an unholy life? You think the Lord hears that prayer? He doesn't hear the prayer of those who are sinners and the eyes of the Lord, or the ears of the Lord, are against those who do evil. 1 Peter 3:12 tells us. So when we approach a holy God in prayer, we have to be living. Now, we all know that we're not holy in the same sense. Absolutely holy. But we can still live holy lives. Faithfulness, that is separation from the world, either morally or in our worship, that is religiously and theologically. And so when we worship Him, we must approach Him in holiness. That is who we are before, that holy God, that holy God. This amazing thing about that particular attribute of Jesus, who is the Holy One. All right, we're going to stop right there. Any final comments or questions? Brother Mark. I think that's an excellent statement. Yeah. What commentary is that? Adam Clark. Okay. That is an excellent statement. Very good. Anything else? All right. If not, we want to end right here. We will pick up with this third point more concerning Jesus, the Christ here, and look at these other things that He says about Himself. He is true, as that verse goes on to say. And then one other thing that He says here, and so there are three things He says. He's holy, He is true, and then it says He has the key of David. He shuts, opens, opens, shuts. We're going to spend some time on that one, okay, because that is really, well, we won't get into it now, but it is really fascinating to study how David, we've talked a lot about David in our Wednesday night class, but how he is a type of Jesus, Jesus being the antitype of that. All right, so we will study the significance of that more later. If you need to respond to the Lord's invitation here this evening, if you need the prayers of your brothers and sisters in Christ, we encourage you. We will certainly help you in that as all together we stand and sing this song of encouragement.